Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is Eagle Star, the host of the Resilient Underdog, where we adapt, overcome, and win. We have an amazing guest today named Kimiko Donahue. We're going to be covering a lot of bases, and trust me, you want to tune into this because, man, she is not just your average lady walking around there on the streets. She has an amazing story of resilience, adversity, and overcoming it all. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kimiko Donahue. Kimiko, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely my pleasure, man. This has been something we've been kind of working on for a little bit and schedules and stuff, the devil's always at work and he's been misaligning some things, but we got
We
it done.
got it in. We got up early. We're making this happen.
We're making this happen and you were out there just slaying the stage all night, for days at a time and you still got up to make it happen. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Kimiko, can I just get into some stuff with you?
Let's go.
All right. What is 1/4 equal, or what is 1/4 equal 1/2 of 1/2 mean to you?
I love that you looked this up prior to this. This so in kindergarten, you wouldn't believe that back in the day I was scared to get up and talk in front of people. Because throughout my life I started, got into musicals. I was the lead character in things, and now I'm singing on stage. I talk to people on stage. I talk to people all day on things like this. But in kindergarten, I had one single line, right? It was a math presentation of sorts. And we were showing fractions. And I got so scared even to say what a quarter was, right? 1/2, that I clammed up, I started crying, and I took off like a like I did not want to be there. So I just look back on that and wonder, what was going through my head? What was I afraid of? What caused me to freeze? And it's really cool to look through the years and see that I don't do that anymore.
Right. So
Mhm.
when you're faced with adverse moment in front of people, instead of crying and running away, you stand strong and you smile on the face of it. It sounds like, right?
Yeah, or what's really cool too is I am now okay crying in public as
Yeah.
well. Like if there's something I'm talking about that, strikes you emotionally, it's okay to cry in front of people. In fact, I feel like that makes you even more people resonate with that even more, with those deep stories anymore.
And I will agree with that. And that's definitely a hard thing to overcome, as we're growing up, especially as men. I can speak for men, right? Like
Yeah.
we're taught to be tough. You don't cry, you don't do all this stuff. But I found so much strength in actually just feeling my vulnerability wherever I feel it. Whereas before growing up, I mean, I grew up with really tough father and just tough situations in life. And so showing vulnerability was kind of weak feeling. But actually, and the reality is we grow up, the experience that you have when you are doing that, it's very empowering. Number one, it's very freeing for you and also empowering for those around you and encouraging, which surprised me. Does that kind of surprise you with people?
It's one of those things that you're not taught to dive into emotions, and I can unpack that a little bit. I think we we don't talk about what's acceptable, or I honestly think we just don't spend enough time talking about those things,
Agree with
especially
that.
as kids, right? Especially
Yeah,
when you're
yeah,
little.
I
When
agree
when
with
you're
that.
feeling most of the feels, right?
Yeah,
Especially.
all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
All of them, all the time. I have a young child, so she went through her little phase, but she's pretty stoic. I don't know where
There you
she
go.
gets that
Yeah.
from, but she is. Okay, so let's can we dive into a little bit of how you grew up, where you're from, things like that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so where were you born?
So I was actually born in Fountain Valley, California,
Oh,
close,
okay,
or it's part of Orange County. So I
okay,
know
so
people know
Southern,
where that is.
yeah. So
Yep.
Southern California, and when did you move out to Arizona? Did you grow up in Southern California? Or
No, I actually grew up in Tucson, Arizona. So when I was
oh,
about 6 years old or so, my parents moved us out to Arizona. My dad owned an engineering firm, and they decided, we want to get away from earthquakes, crime, and all the crazy stuff happening in California at the time and now. And I'm glad they did because I love Tucson. I've lived in Phoenix, Arizona for a little while, but came back to Tucson just because that's home to me.
okay, so you're in Tucson now.
Yes. Yep. Currently in
Okay.
Tucson.
I was actually born in Arizona, and then my parents moved me to Washington, right when I was
Oh,
2.
okay.
So I was born in Bisbee.
Nice. I love Bisbee.
So, uh, so you grew up in Tucson, Arizona. So what was growing up like? So your father was an engineer.
Yes, and actually so was my mom. But as I was growing up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So
Okay.
I had a great childhood. My parents were amazing and are amazing. Both my parents are still here, thank goodness. Mom, yep. So they got married super young
Mhm.
and didn't have me until their early to mid 30s.
Okay.
And mom decided to be a stay-at-home mom, so she was always there, got my sister and I into activities, and dad was the workaholic entrepreneur, making things happen. As a child, I definitely didn't see it that way, right? And I thought dad's never around, he's not part of anything, and you know um that was really hard to grasp as a child. So it felt like your dad wasn't there. Obviously as an adult now, and we can walk through that later if you want, but as an adult now, I look back at that and it made me respect my dad that much more. When I was little, I was like, "Oh, I'm never going to be like that when I grow up." Well, guess what I turned into?
Right.
I am exactly that. So,
Right.
yeah.
So kind of let's walk through kind of some of the emotions that you had when you had, a dad that was just out there busting it. You had, a wonderful mother at home, which is great, and but what did it feel like and what were your thoughts, as dad was out there, providing and building the life and doing all those things as an engineer entrepreneur.
Yeah. I think looking back on it, and it's hard to say because I'm an adult now and have a completely different, perspective on it. But I think as a child, I really just wanted him to be there for the extracurricular stuff,
Right.
like sports or music. I
Yeah.
was in choir. I really just wanted him to at least see what that looked like and be proud of it. He was proud, but I wanted him to be there. So I think my
Yeah.
feelings were you know uh maybe work is more important, or really what it was my dad is not he's not social at all. He's definitely your textbook, engineer, introvert would homebody, so
Yeah.
if he had to go somewhere, it was like anxiety. So again, completely different perspective now as an adult, but as a kid, you didn't understand that, and it
Right.
probably wasn't explained to me like that either. And it's just interesting that there's a lot of parallels between me and my dad, and if I would have known that as a kid, we probably would have been a lot closer,
Right.
growing up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I know I kind of had the same experience. So I was a foster kid, but my foster father, he's just a stone cold, hard, old school cowboy, but very
Mm.
loving, very caring. But I remember, for me, same thing, sporting events. I played football. Everybody in our family played football. Um, and to look up in the crowd and not see the person you're looking for, kind of hard, it was like hard on my heart, and it actually really helped me, fueled my games. Like I had something to be angry about. So that helped. I was a defensive player, So Um, but how did it feel for you when you'd kind of look up in the crowd at your different sporting events or, social events, musical events, things like that, and, not see the person that you hope to see? What was that experience like for you?
Mm, I think I knew that he wasn't going to be there, so I didn't have the expectation of him showing up. So I think that might be a little bit different. Obviously, when they invented camcorders, right, that my mom was able to start recording that so that my dad could watch it. Which, again, as an adult, I look back and I'm like, okay, so he was still interested, he still watched it, but definitely different as a kid. Um, but yeah,
think we touched a nerve there.
it
Looks
it
like it.
did. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that definitely is a huge piece of, I mean, anyone's childhood, not just me. People with it, and I think I have a hard time talking about it because I always thought, well, there's nothing special about my story because again, I had an amazing childhood, right? My both of my parents together made a great team. They still do. They are still married. They've been married for goodness, if they're 40 something years, right? And they're making it happen. Uh Again, I wish it would have been explained to me better that there was a reason he was a hermit. I'll call it out. That's what he is. Love him to death. But if you've ever seen, did you ever watch that TV show Monk?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yep, about the guy with obsessive
Yeah.
compulsive
Yeah.
disorder. My dad has a lot of those characteristics.
Okay.
So I come from a family of some people call it neurodivergent now, which was a new word for me. And I guess I would fall under that category as well. So again, I being introduced that word was like, huh, what is that? And growing up around
What is that? I mean, I'm wondering.
yeah. So a, a lot of people would define it very differently, but somebody with a learning difference, right? Like ADD, ADHD, OCD, all the acronyms, right, that could be
Okay.
attached to you.
So kind of brilliant in a unique way.
Oh, 1,000%. Oh,
Yeah.
my both of my parents, my entire family, amazingly intelligent people. My mom was I believe the salutatorian. She could correct me if she was here, but she National Honor Society, straight A's, textbook Asian lady, right? Like she was great at school. Great at
Great at
school.
school and it's great at saving money.
There you well, we can touch on that maybe. But that's one thing that I did not learn from my parents. So
Right.
we'll
Okay.
shelf that for a minute.
All right.
So parents met in engineering school, and my dad also just in my brain, genius man, like creative. He's built and sold his own companies, plural. Um, Again, extremely intelligent, just not social, right?
Right.
And my whole family is like that except for me.
What do you think
Which
that
and
is?
which
Why do you
which
think you're
what's
so
interesting.
different?
So talking about, being a underdog or feeling like an outcast your whole life, I felt like I was completely, opposite personality of my parents and my little sister. I have a little
Okay.
sister as well. And she's also extremely smart. Straight A student, didn't have to study, still got good grades. I had to work my butt off to get even decent grades. So growing up, I thought, well, I'm not as smart as most people, right? So just having that chip on your shoulder made you do a lot of different things. And I was definitely a lot more outgoing and hyper compared to the rest of my family. So I'm sure it was a lot for them to handle, as we were growing up. I was a tough kid.
Oh yeah. How do you think you're tough as a kid?
Uh Very emotional, very reactive, very particular, and uh what else? What other adjectives could I throw on there? Definitely rebellious. But here's the coolest part about all of that. My
Okay.
mom was supportive through the whole thing. I will tell you this. I would not be who I am today if it wasn't for the way my mom raised me and my sister. She she encouraged us to try new things. She encouraged us to be ourselves. For example, we're allowed to dress the way we want within, you know, uh parameters, it's got to be appropriate, right?
Yeah.
But I look back at my childhood photos. Oh my God, Eagle Star. I was wearing like a cat vest with white socks and sandals. Like I look back at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, who let me go out? Mom,
Yeah.
right? But
Right. Expression of personality.
yeah, exactly. But I look back and I'm like, you know what? That's go mom. I love
I
that.
mean, I think that's kind of played out well in your life now,
Yes. Yeah,
having
absolutely.
confidence and expressing yourself boldly.
Yeah, and not afraid to be different. In fact,
Yeah.
I I wanted so much of my identity was being an outcast, and we can also unpack this later too, that it just became part of me that I did everything in my power to be different. I
Yeah.
wanted
Well,
to stand out.
let's unpack that now.
Okay, here we go.
All right. So, you wanted to be different.
Mhm.
Outcast was kind of like a superpower for you. So why do you think you latched on to that being, because most people are running away from being viewed or anything to do with an outcast,
Right.
so why do you think that was something that was so meaningful and powerful for you, being so different and allowing, and latching onto that as something that gave you power?
Absolutely. I think it was a coping mechanism. So let's hit on a really important highlight in my life that most people don't know about just because I don't post it because I never wanted it to be a label about myself. But fourth grade, I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, among a bunch of
Okay.
other
Yeah.
fun acronyms that come along with that, right? I think ADHD, OCD, so that's going to be attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, whatever, right? And perhaps I was overdiagnosed. I will definitely say the doctor that we went to, he asked a few questions and then just threw, names at me. So neither here or there. But I grew up with facial twitches, with arm arm twitches, things like that. I still have it. The nice thing about my journey is it got a lot better, but you will see, especially my face move around a lot more when I'm nervous or upset, like highly emotional or
Okay.
bored. And it's hard to see on Zoom, but you'll see my eye. I'll have like a almost like a wink thing happening, and sometimes some they call them ticks.
Yeah.
Not like ticks like that suck your
Yeah. Yeah.
blood,
Yeah.
but TIC ticks
Yeah.
with Tourette's.
I
So
think I got some of that, dude. My eye twitches a lot. So
yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people have tics. So I
yeah.
I think I believe unless it's changed, but when I was diagnosed, you would have to have two motor tics, in other words, some kind of movement, right? And one
Okay.
vocal tic. So something that some sound that or something that you did with your mouth. So
Okay.
I had all that, right?
All right.
So going back to fourth grade. So growing up, I had, these things happening, right? And my parents and I thought that they were just habits. So
Mm.
one, it caused attention, right? Because you're doing something weird with your face and people are wondering, why are you doing that? I had one uh that looked like I was getting my hair out of my face. So I was constantly doing that. And yes, it hurts your neck a lot. But you'd get teachers looking at you saying, "Why are you shaking your head at me?" And they'd get upset, like really upset with you. And I just couldn't help it. So felt a lot of shame, a lot of, like, oh gosh, I shouldn't be doing this, along with my parents and I trying to stop it. There was a reward system on the refrigerator. We'd check off, hey, maybe you haven't done this in 30 minutes, you can get ice cream, right? And I love, if you know me, I love ice cream. And I didn't get it because I couldn't stop it for more than maybe 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. So a lot of that experience is what made me go, you know what? I need to embrace who I am and just own it. So I will say, although I'm not a huge fan of labels, giving a name to what was happening allowed me to go, okay, this is now part of me, and I need to be able to own it and explain it to people and educate them about it. And from that just developed this, okay, I'm different. And th- I'm having an epiphany right now during this podcast. I think some of the other things that really went into this identity of mine was the fact that I'm also so mixed, right? So my mom, born in Japan, adopted by Japanese Americans here in America, and my dad, born in Massachusetts, his family is of Irish descent, hence the last name Donahue, right? So super mixed, and a lot of, well, I feel like I'm speaking for other people, but I've come across some TikTok videos and Instagram videos of biracial people talking about how they never knew which side to fit in with, right?
Right.
Uh,
I get it.
and growing up, my mom did an excellent job of never creating an identity for either of those. She did. I mean, again, I've got such smart parents, so thank you, mom, for allowing both me and my sister to just kind of figure things out. Now, pros and cons to that, right?
Sure.
Without that guidance, you feel really lost growing up as a kid, and actually before we started this podcast, I know you and I were talking a little bit about um spirituality, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that my parents said, "Oh, you and your sister go figure it out," right? And it was their way of saying we're not going to create that for you. You can go and create it yourself, which is amazing, right? Most people don't get that privilege at
Uh,
all, ever.
Not whole privilege anyway.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
get some little leash, but they don't get freedom of it, you know?
Right. Right. So we got that. Again, so thankful. But yeah, growing up you're a little bit lost because you're like, okay, most of the kids, growing up had a religion. And
Right.
also, kids can be so mean to each other. So
Oh,
of course
yeah.
they're like, well, you don't believe in God, you're going to hell. So I heard
Right.
that a lot. I heard that so much as a kid. So of course that creates, some resentment in your head, right? Uh People didn't know what ethnicity I was. So they're like, "Well, what are you? Hawaiian, Mexican?" I'm like, "I'm neither. I'm
Yeah.
I'm just me." And I remember getting in a huge fight. Yes, a huge fight with one of my teachers. So do you remember, I think you and I are similar age. Do you remember growing up and having to take those tests where you had to bubble what your race was?
As Fabbers. No, it's yeah, I do remember that. Well,
Yeah.
was it yeah, I know which
I
test you're
don't remember
talking
what
about.
it was, but I remember it, you have to stick your pencil in it and,
Yep.
and open it up and then
Yep.
circle
I
what your name and your
absolutely
race
remember.
is.
Yes.
And I put white. Just
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what's on my birth certificate anyway, but whatever. So I put white and this teacher gets like visibly upset with me saying, "No, no, you're a Pacific Islander." And I'm like, "No, I was born here in America, in California. I'm going to go ahead and put whatever, whatever." And I just it just yeah, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, "I wasn't born in Japan. I was born here."
Right.
And oh man, this has opened up a whole lot. This is fun.
That's the
This
point.
is I mean, this is what developed that outcast mentality, right? I
Right.
thought, okay, I've got some weird stuff happening in my brain. I don't know what ethnicity I am. I don't know what religion I am. I am Kimmy. So I
Right.
embraced that, growing, I mean, all the way up into, my adulthood. With with that, when you consider yourself an outcast 100% of the time, it can get super lonely
Oh, yeah.
because it's very hard to relate to people because you don't want to. Because so much of your identity is wrapped up in, I want to be different. I'm an outcast, well, then you end up being that outlier, and 100% it gets super super depressing, super lonely, and that's
For a
yeah.
period. But here's one thing to remember about the outliers or the outcasts or the ones that are different. They're always the ones that change the world.
I hope so. I'd like to think even if I can change one person's life, I did a good job. So
I think you're successfully doing that. Let me tell you how
thank you.
I just to pause, I'm going to give you a compliment for a minute. One way that I see you doing it is living authentically and proving to the young women out there. Number one, I don't think we have a really enough positive female or male role models that
Mm,
exemplify the right things. And one of those most important things, I have a young daughter, that I believe it is for young women is confidence in who they are.
mhm.
So you go out and you do that every day
Thank you.
when you're singing, playing guitar, on social media. I think that you confidently display that, it doesn't matter and gender isn't important. And but especially I think I have 5 sisters too. So,
There you go. There you go.
um, girl, I have 5 sisters and a daughter, and I've just always been surrounded by a lot of young ladies in my life that are family
Mhm.
members and things and nieces and all that stuff. But they need to develop the confidence and the courage. And that's one thing that's kind of just beat out of them a lot, you know. And one of the things that I see that they've struggled with the most is that confidence and that courage. And I think you exemplify true feminist woman. And I mean that in the best way, because I think
Thank
a
you.
true feminist, it like empowers people, empowers women, and owns who they are. They're not beating down everybody, you know, hate men and all that stuff. That's not a true feminist. A feminist is an empowering force, and you are
Yeah.
absolutely
I
that.
think the definition is different for a lot of people, for
Sure,
sure.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And if I pissed you off and you didn't like what I said, I don't really care. Turn off the show. But anyway, um, that being said, so like you kind of grew up kind of this outlier. It sounds like, you didn't belong to this race, or you weren't into these things, or you weren't really sure how to just be you. You're figuring it out like, most kids, right? So what would you
Sure.
say that like that the impact that that had on you, especially in your most influenced years, right? So your early years, especially into your teenage years. Like I know like that's always the big identity crisis for people,
Yeah.
is like, who am I? And where do I belong? Because we all, well, I mean, as humans, we're all seeking our group of people. For lack of a better way to say it, we're all herd animals. We all want a tribe. We want people engagement. And when we're just standing out here on our own little island, it is very lonely. I can absolutely attest to what you described, because I was the same way. I didn't really fit in anywhere. I didn't want to. I wanted to be me, but I didn't
Yeah.
know that it was okay. Did you kind of go through that?
I think so, especially when I was little. I would say into the teenage years, I I was one of those people that had friend all kinds of different friend groups, right? You really don't notice, well, I didn't. So I went to a private school for my middle school years from 6th to 8th grade.
Okay.
Because when we found out that I had learning differences, my parents took me to a private school that really embraced that and helped kids through that too. So a lot of my friends in middle school also had similar or more severe you know, learning differences, learning disabilities, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it was literally a school of neurodivergent kids from kindergarten all the way to senior year high school age. So I
Yeah.
got to be immersed in that,
Hmm.
from kids with autism, with people that had extremely traumatic childhoods. So I will say a big piece also of what's made me become who I am today was being able to befriend people from such diverse backgrounds and diverse ways of doing life, right? Some of my best friends in middle school uh had, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume were diagnosed with some sort of, autism, being on the spectrum, or uh pretty severe obsessive compulsive disorder. Like a few of them wore the same clothes every single day, and it would drive them crazy if they didn't. Ones that brushed their hair constantly, ones that didn't make eye contact, but you knew they were listening. So
Yeah.
just being able to be around all sorts of a variety of people, I think also really helped me be who I am and accept people for who and what they are. I think everybody should go through that experience. I actually think the world would be a lot kinder if people were exposed to that more.
Absolutely agree with that, and we get exposed to that through our own experiences personally and
Mm.
with the people that were around. I was kind of the same way in school. Like I'm from a very small town. My whole school was K through 12.
Yep.
My graduating class was 22. like,
Yeah, there you go.
but I was a jock. I was a jock. Like, and I wasn't known for being like intelligent, but I also wasn't dumb. I was just bored. But I didn't hang around with like the jock crowd, the popular kids. I actually would have lunch with the nerdies and the outcasts, right? Like that's just who I wanted to talk to because they were who they were, and I just wanted to be who I was. And so I never really fit into a group, and it gave me a lot of who I am today, and also allowed me to walk in a lot of different circles, just like you, and to where I can now even do that today. I would definitely say my early childhood had a lot to play in my ability to, understand and read my environment and fit into different groups. And as I was being authentic to myself in every way, but I am just not a cookie cutter person. I imagine kind of like you as a kid. You probably
Sure.
weren't cookie cutter, right? You just,
No, definitely not. And the thing is, I don't think anybody is.
I
I think
agree.
what happens is you identify with a label and you just
Mhm.
immerse yourself in just that. And I actually see that as a problem happening now.
Huge problem.
Huge problem. And I challenge even my own kid this and her friends because they'll come up with a label and say I am this. I'm like, "Are you? Are you just that?" And why give yourself a label? Because now you're pigeonholing yourself into this, and it's real hard to get out of. I mean, I've seen. Uh, I'm not that old, but just through my life experience, I've seen people create a label, and that becomes their identity, and it takes them years to figure out maybe that's not it. And I guess my question for you is, you growing up, you said you were, kind of more the jock type. Is did you see yourself that way, or did you see yourself maybe more broad, and that's why you had groups of friends, other groups of
Well,
friends?
I knew that's one part of who I was. Like I played sports.
Mhm,
I was a football player, but I didn't really identify with that personally. I just knew that was an aspect.
mhm,
And I really accredit my early childhood to me developing, I guess, personality, right? And identity of who I was. Like number one, I was from an abusive, broken home. Father was not around. He left on Christmas Day when I was 5.
mm,
Um, Extremely poor. My mother was mentally ill. She's schizophrenic and manic depressive, and at that time, unmedicated and unbalanced. A lot of physical abuse. Um, I was I became independent in my own person very early.
yeah.
And
Are you the oldest out of the kids?
I'm in the middle. So at
Okay.
that time, I had an older sister and then a younger sister that came when I was about 5. I was about 5. She was born.
Mhm,
Um, so I had an older sister and a younger sister, but I had to learn a lot about life very early. And so that's how I think I was able to kind of navigate between so many different groups of people is because, well, your instincts and survival instincts and all that stuff kick in. So I learned how to read my environment, read people, get into different groups, find safe harbors, um, and also learned how to stay away from places that were going to be harmful to me. So
mm,
I
yeah.
say one of the gifts that I learned from that is I can get to know everything I need to know about someone on a base level in 5 minutes. Now,
Mm,
I can meet you, and it's like a series of questions. Just instinctually, I ask you certain things so I can get to know certain points about a person of whether or not I should distance myself from you or I can draw you close. Did you develop anything like that as a kid?
not at all. And actually, I'm listening to this. I'm like, oh my goodness, if we were only friends when I was growing up, I would have gotten myself out of a lot of really bad situations a lot sooner.
Okay.
Uh, that's that's interesting. I would say I grew up completely opposite, where I did not ask any questions. I just went right into assuming people are the best people, and I wanted to be friends with everybody. And I saw the good in everybody. Even,
I was
oh
the same.
man, oh,
I was the same. I never had anything really bad happen, but let me tell you, I'm still that way, just like you described. However, I just instinctually, based on survival, my home
mm,
wasn't a safe place. Your home sounds like it was.
very, yeah.
So I didn't have a safe place. My home was actually the most dangerous place.
Mm,
So every place that I found outside that was good, it was outside of the home. I stayed away from the home. I found different groups, different people, different experiences outside here. But I also like just instinctually, based on just human biology, the animalistic instincts of us, like I learned how to navigate fast and be around and find the right things, you know. And I found the wrong things from time to time,
sure.
but it's
That's how
absolutely
we learn,
helped.
right?
It's absolutely helped me in life, you know.
Good.
So being that you did not develop that instinct, what kind of things like happened or did you get into when you were in your most, I say, you know, influential years, like so as a teenager, early teens up into your teens, where you're really, you know, struggling with identity? Who am I? Where do I
Mhm.
belong? Like what kind of experiences you have during that time, being that you didn't have the same gauge that like I developed?
Yeah, I think, well, coming from a small private school, and I'd love to hear your stories as well after you leave small town school, you know. So I went from a small private school to a very large public high school. And I remember my first week of school. And remember, I went to school with a bunch of kids that would most likely be in special ed in public school, right? So imagine going from that to a complete variety of all sorts of people. And my first week, I remember being in the girls' bathroom, and there's these girls getting and like just chugging this water bottle. And I'm like, what is happening? Come to find out it was vodka in this water bottle, right? I was never, I haven't been exposed to alcohol like ever, right? This is my first experience. My parents don't drink. My parents are very straight edge, very straight edge. And so I'm sitting here watching these girls just getting hammered right
Lit.
before I think like second period, right? This is the first week of freshman year.
I was going to ask
And these
about that.
girls are
Okay.
just going to town. I'm like, okay, there's what am I doing? Why am I here? Like it definitely freaked me out. And what was also very interesting was probably the first couple of weeks, you know, I a lot of these kids probably went to middle school together, you know, or have seen each other through the years. And so I naturally gravitated to the group that I felt maybe looked like me, right? And at the time, coming out of middle school, I was just starting to get into, you know, metal music, kind of like the goth scene, right? So I'm in probably all black with DC skate shoes, right? This is dating us back to
Oh yeah.
when those came out.
Oh yeah.
And so I
Gun
naturally
block.
gravitate to like the goth group. Like I see a couple girls that look like vampires. I'm like, cool. You look
Those are
like
my
someone I'd
people.
get along with, right?
Yeah.
And I hang out with them for like the first month, and then eventually, you know, start getting to know more people. And I'm hanging out with the skater kids, the journalism class, the you know, you name it. The kids that play Dungeons and Dragons, which I never learned how to play, but I'd go sit
Still
down
don't
and hang out with
understand
them,
it.
right? So, uh, goodness gracious, I lost my where we were going with this.
Sorry, I don't know how to turn off these pop-ups. Can you see them? That's getting
No,
pop-ups
no,
on me.
no, no, it's
Oh,
me. I realize
okay.
I'm talking about high school, and it's interesting because I really don't think about high school all that much.
Well, I hope
Um,
not. You're not
no,
there anymore.
yeah, yeah, we're not there anymore, and I don't think that a lot of my big childhood, excuse me, my big experiences life happened during that time. So I think that's another reason I don't think about it. But as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I guess a lot did happen.
I mean,
Just
we
because
moved
that's when
past
I was
high school,
finding,
but we go back and we reflect, and you're like, you know, this actually did have some
yeah,
very transformative moments. It wasn't just this, you know, popularity contest or like I hated being here. I just had to go because my parents made me and the government told me to, you know,
mm,
like so like I had to go. But
yeah,
there's actually a lot that happens in school that, when we think back on it now, even today, like, is part of what influences us. Like I was actually, you're gonna blow your mind on this. I was in special ed classes in my school, especially for
Mhm.
math, but it's not that was dumb. I just didn't like it.
Yeah, I get that.
So, and so like speaking of labels, like you touched on earlier, I was labeled because I was in special ed classes. I wasn't labeled necessarily by teachers, but by the peer population I was.
Mm, yep.
And then also, what I was labeled as growing up, just based on nothing that I had any control over, but just my family dynamics. I was labeled an at risk and troubled youth because I was from a broken home with an absentee father, a mother that was mentally ill, and I was placed in foster care. But it's not because I was a problem. So I absolutely agree with you that I don't like labels, but labels can be very empowering.
Yeah,
So like I
exactly. It just depends
determine,
on how you
yeah,
see it.
100%. Like you get to determine what these labels are and mean for you. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Let's say you've had one that is bothered you. There's definitely ways to reframe that and now turn it into something that is empowering, that is a piece of you that you can own
Yeah, just
and
like you,
empower
right?
others
That's
with,
what you did,
perhaps.
you know.
Absolutely.
So, and I know it's what I did. I said, when I was labeled an at-risk and troubled youth, I still have a problem with it. I still like it irritates me to no end that we place those kind of stigmas. But thankfully, I was an honorary little shit, and I'm like, you don't get to determine that. You can call me that all you want, but I decide what that means. I define the statistic and what that looks like. So statistically, yeah, on paper, I look like this because I'm in that category, but you don't know me. You don't know this
Mhm.
heart. I'm not going to be what you say it is. I'm going to determine what that looks like. And I think it's really empowering. Would you agree that kind of once you took charge of your labels and your stigmas and things like that, that it really just kind of gave you power?
1,000%. And actually, I'd love to ask is if you didn't have that label, do you think you would still work as hard as you do today?
I wouldn't work as hard in the same way. I was taught to be a hard worker
Mhm.
by my foster father, who I ended up with when I was 12, right? Rancher cowboy. We work. There was work all
Yeah.
the time. I didn't realize the impact that just learning how to work would have on me throughout the rest of my life, but I wouldn't be working hard in the same way. I'd be working hard without a purpose beyond accomplishing a physical task. So now, because of that label, I work very hard uh, for a purpose of impacting, empowering, and helping people use their stories. Right. So I work just as hard physically, but the thing that enriches me the most, the work that enriches me the most, is the work that I do to empower people, help people define themselves, their statistics, their labels, own their stories. All these things are so great that you went through. Everything that happened to me, I'm so grateful for every day. Being punched in the face by my mom, thank you. You know what that taught me? I'm just sorry. I'm going to just say this.
Go for it.
What it taught me, something that I learned very early in life, is that God and the devil use the same tool.
Mm.
That tool is people. The devil uses people to hurt you, oftentimes the people closest to you to hurt you the worst, so he can enslave you. And God uses strangers a lot of the time to empower you. One has good intentions, one has bad. But really, what that taught me very early is world hits hard and it hits often, and it couldn't break me. So the worst things that ever happened in my life happened to me before I was 10 years old, and it couldn't break me then. It's not going to break me now. I just get gritty. Time to go
Yeah.
to war. So that definitely shaped me in a lot of ways. That had a huge impact.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Thanks for sharing it.
yeah, absolutely. Your turn.
Yeah, I You know what's interesting too is if I look at my life's timeline, I would say the my childhood's definitely what shaped me,
Yeah.
as far as my identity and who I am today. But the darker parts of my life are actually going to come later, more towards my young adult years. So because I considered myself an outcast, right? I
Right.
thought that the partners or people that I associate with should also be outcasts. Now, everyone has a different definition of that, right? And I would find not on purpose. So this is what's interesting too, is I look back on my life and go, what the heck was I doing, right? I just for whatever reason gravitated towards people that were broken,
Mhm.
which e- especially when you're young can usually mean bad news, right? Someone that is not nice, perhaps,
Yeah.
someone that is into things that you shouldn't be into, you know.
Okay. So what'd you get into?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't. Just being
Okay.
surrounded by people like that
Same.
just was not good for life, right? So, I think back, it's just interesting because this is also a high school story. I was at the mall with a couple friends, and we were in Hot Topic, go figure, and he steals a necklace.
Okay.
And I don't know this yet, right? So we're waltzing around, going down the mall, and all of a sudden this mall security stops us and says, "Hey, you need to give that back." And I'm looking around like, what's happening? What'd you guys do?" And I guess he ditched it in a trash can. Anyway, they found it, and we got banned from my favorite store at the mall because one of my friends stole something. And it broke my heart because, again, I come from a great childhood. I could have bought that for him. I wish he
Yeah.
would have known that I would have loved to help and not have him get in trouble over that. And I
Sure.
remember that just stuck with me, like, oh my gosh, I'm hanging out with people that are stealing, and that can get me in trouble. It did.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed back there for years. A very recognizable face. They know right away when I walk in.
Yeah.
And I think I had maybe red hair anyway, I always had, dyed hair. So it,
Yeah.
it was easy.
Emo
So
kid.
that's just
You know.
one instance. And uh, the next people that I started hanging out with was also my first introduction to drugs. I'd never
Yeah.
been around it before. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what
Yeah.
people look like on drugs. This is
Right.
how I use the word sheltered. And again, it wasn't on purpose. It was just the way I was raised and the
Right.
people I hung out with. But I'd never seen that before. And thank goodness, uh, I don't know what and how my parents instilled this in me, but I managed to stay away personally, never, getting involved in that. Um and it but hanging around those kinds of people, they get in trouble. They're very mean, as
Oh, yeah.
especially being on some of that stuff, and it was very depressing to be around, and you wanted so badly to help them, but you couldn't.
I
So,
completely understand.
yeah, very, very dark piece there. And it continues on into my early adulthood. Just for whatever reason in my brain, and maybe it was a self-worth conversation at the time. Again, I have a completely different perspective today. So to go back into that mindset, it's a little cloudy. But I'm assuming it was around a self-worth piece, just not understanding, hey, Kimmy, you can be an outsider, but still deserve the best.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
definitely did not choose the best for me. And then getting into my young adult years, uh very similar, but I would be attracted to people that were winning in whatever, field they're in. So fast forward to I'm out of high school now. I am 18, almost 19, and the one of the most life-changing pieces of my life happens. I get pregnant at the age of 20. Oops. And
Probably
I
not planned.
remember the day I found out, I was so scared to tell my dad.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I'm about to die. I'm, you know,
Yeah. I'm gonna
not
shatter
when I
my
say that,
dad's
I don't,
heart.
my parents are not violent. They really don't yell like it, well, I guess dad did yell a little bit, but anyway, I was so scared to tell my dad.
Sure.
And I make the phone call and it's the opposite. My mom was probably the most upset and my dad was like, well, gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah. That's kind of how, dads are, right? And
Yeah.
men in general.
Yeah. And they did a good job with it as, as things progressed, but that absolutely changed my life because it gave me a responsibility that I didn't have for myself. That makes sense. Like I now I knew that I had to make things happen
Yeah.
because it something this child is now going to be depending on me,
It can't be
and
just
that
a wild
includes
20-year-old anymore.
yeah. Yeah, I mean I was young. Again, going back to how much time do we have?
Much as we want.
Okay. Going back to childhood, right? And I talked about my parents taught me a lot of things, right? Come from a great place. They were also very, financially well off, right? My dad built and sold engineering firms. So
Okay. Yeah.
I had a great childhood, right? They did not teach me the value of money and what it takes when you're coming from nothing, right?
Right.
So I moved out early. Well, I say early, but a lot of kids are still living at home in their 20s, right? So 18 years old, move out. I remember my the first time moving out, I had to call my mom and ask her, "Hey, how much laundry detergent do I put in the laundry machine?" Like you
Oh
just
wow. Okay. So you
I'm
really
tell
just had, I'm gonna say it like this, but I don't really mean it in a negative
go for
tone.
it, hit
But
me.
you were like the silver spoon kid. Like,
Oh,
mom took care of laundry, made all the meals, you had the
yes.
world out in front of you, parents were
Yes.
financially set, private schools.
Yep.
Like you come from that, family
Indoor
on the hill,
pool.
so to speak.
We had an indoor pool. That's what I mean. Like it
Okay.
beautiful childhood, right? You don't learn grit, right? Until you're
Oh,
faced with something that
oftentimes
teaches
makes
you
you
that.
soft.
So
Yeah.
yeah, again, the nice thing is I had that outlier mentality. So I had a chip on my shoulder. I had something to prove. So that's
What
where
a
the fire
gift.
comes from. But
I
I
love
did
that you
not,
had that, by the way. Can I just point on that? I just want to sit on that for a minute. You come from quote unquote the dream family, dream upbringing, everything at your fingertips, but you come from the outlier mentality, the grit, the worthiness, the fight, the mentality. What a gift to be able to even be in proximity to that coming from where you come from. So I want the listeners to hear that. Like, so maybe you didn't come from, the definition maybe of a disadvantaged family. Maybe you come from a highly advantaged family, but
absolutely.
you didn't quite fit into the picture. At least you didn't feel like it. So I want you to know, like resilient underdogs, they come from all different paths and places. Some from pristine upbringings, had everything at their fingertips, and some from the bottom of the ditch. I call it the
Absolutely.
pit, from the pit.
The pits.
The pit.
Yes. I like it. That's
You need
very
to write a
metal.
song called The Pit,
Yeah.
motivational song called The Pit,
There you
heavy
go.
metal
Yeah,
song.
it's got to be a metal song if you're calling it the pit.
Exactly. So I just wanted to touch on that because I mean, look, you're a perfect example, and the power that you had because you developed that outlier mentality just because you're your own individual, it sounds like, which I love.
Yeah,
Um,
that's definitely where the fire came from. The things that teach you true grit is when you're faced with something that you've got nothing and your back's to the wall, right? I mean,
right.
I think anyone listening that's gone through something like that will resonate. Um,
100%.
so here I am, I move out, I'm faced with having to figure out how to pay rent, do my own laundry, right? Oh no, poor Kimmy. Uh, but being, now you got
It's hard the
a
first time.
kiddo to take care of, that changes your world, right?
Yeah, rocks it.
It changes your world. And also, meanwhile, trying to support uh a family, right? And so immediately I think, okay, I need to figure out how to make more money. You know, how am I
Yeah.
going to set up a life?
Yep.
And again, I come from a family of very uh, academically smart, engineers, great at math. Eagle Star, just like you, I was not good at math. I took algebra 3 years in a row, right? So
Yeah.
I struggled with math. So
Your parents are
obviously,
just shaking their head.
yeah, I did not go to school to become an engineer. So
Right.
I'm going to school at a community college, not really sure what I'm going to do. In my brain, I thought maybe I'll become a high school English teacher. I love writing.
Okay. I was gonna ask you like where that
Yeah,
came
I know.
from.
People are like,
Okay.
what the heck? I love writing. Uh, which is funny because I was also a kid that never read. I did not read books
Yeah.
like a lot of people. Not until my adult years. I finally finished, I think,
Same.
my second book.
Yeah.
I didn't
So
have the attention span, at least that's what I thought, to be able to finish a book. So I'm going to college and I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, teachers don't make all that much money. Love teachers. Again,
yeah.
one day, when I can do it out of the kindness of my heart, I would love to do that. And we'll again why I'm going to become a coach, right? Because then you get to teach and help people.
Amen, girl.
I decided, you know what? What's the best industry to make money, right? And I
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I realize sales
Hmm.
in anything
And we're doing it our whole
uncapped.
life, whether we want to admit it or not. We're selling our friends, we're selling our kids, we're selling our
You're selling
parents.
yourself. You have
Yeah.
to sell things to yourself every
Yeah.
day. Yep.
We have to sell less to people, right?
Yeah.
Like our peer groups and stuff, our friend groups.
Exactly. So I look at sales. I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do? Right. So I get a job at a motorcycle shop because I rode, well, that's a whole nother story. But anyway, I got a motorcycle. Parents bought it for me for senior year because I did really well on a senior project about how I was gonna get a motorcycle, learn to ride
Pretty
it,
cool parents.
right?
Most parents
Yeah.
are not buying their, especially daughters,
No.
motorcycles in senior year. Just saying.
No, I wrote, let's just say I wrote a very convincing paper. Again, I love writing. So,
Yeah.
uh, yes, received a gift, a Ninja 250. So it was a little
Woo!
motorcycle,
Yeah,
right?
but
Still
still,
dangerous as hell,
great
but it
bike to
wasn't,
start with.
something I'm going to go pop a wheelie and take off, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so I ride in on a motorcycle to a shop. Again, I'm a young 18-year-old girl on a motorcycle. I get the job. I get the job.
Yeah.
uh, I know nothing about sales.
Right.
Nothing. No, and nobody taught me either.
Well,
I
nothing
literally just stood
formally.
there waiting for people to come to me, oh, here's a motorcycle, whatever. I remember I got so excited. It was my first day on the job. I sell a motorcycle. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I must be really good at this." I look back at it, it was the luck of the draw. A guy was coming in to buy a tank protector for his motorcycle, and I think I just smiled at him the right way, and he walks out with a Ninja 10 ZX10.
Okay. Yeah.
So in my brain, I'm like, wow, I must be a really good salesperson. So through
Feeling
I don't
yourself.
I don't think I sold anything else after that. Anyway, well, so I end up leaving because I'm like, oh gosh, maybe I'm not good at this. End up getting a job at a car wash.
Okay.
And this is where I learned my sales skills, or at least start to, right? Obviously it's still a journey, but my job at the car wash was to upsell, the car wash packages and the
Right.
tire shine. I was the tire shine girl.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Tire shine girl. Okay.
Yep, and, I remember going back to the outcast mentality, people look at that, they're like, "You worked at a car wash?" I'm like, "Actually, at the time, and when you're 18, 19 years old, that is good money," or almost
And that
20 years old,
I'm gonna
because,
say that's kind
you're
of a
making
cool job, you know.
you're making commission, you get to be outside in the beautiful, Tucson weather, and you get to talk to people all day. So it also helped me get better at talking to people, right?
Mhm.
And I got to learn a little bit of Spanish, only car wash terms and probably bad words, but it was
The most important ones are the bad
right?
words. That
Hey,
sells
it was
every time.
it was a fun job. I really enjoyed it. But anyway, during that time, I find out I'm pregnant, right? So I am 20 years old, prego, working at a car wash. Oh gosh, what am I gonna do? Fast forward to I meet a gal who is a State Farm insurance agent. And she says, Kimmy, I think you'd be really good at insurance. And like probably a week later, we've got a guy rolling into the car wash in an extremely nice vehicle. and he gives me his card. He's like, "Hey, Kimmy, I sell life insurance. You know, you really should take a look at this industry." So I'm thinking, oh, there's a sign. Maybe I should look at this. So I start studying up for my property casualty insurance license. And by the grace of God, my parents' insurance agent, who's also a State Farm agent, says, "Hey, you know what? I could use some help. I'll take you under my wing and teach you everything I know." So 6 months pregnant, get hired on by an insurance agent, still work at the car wash part-time, on the weekends and the afternoon. So I've got two jobs. I'm going to school. I'm pregnant. I'm in a very toxic relationship trying to figure out life. And have my kiddo take a couple months off and realize props to props to stay-at-home parents. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. I
Oh,
personally cannot.
hey,
I had to get back to work. So
not for everybody, like
yeah,
there's some people that just thrive like in that
it's
role
it's
and some
an
that don't.
extremely hard, taxing, draining job. Thank you, Mom. She did it for 16 years. She went back to school and started working again as soon as I could drive.
Okay.
So my mom did it for 16 years straight. So thank you, Mama. And
Should probably
my
interview your
grandma
mom
too.
on
She was
this
a stay at
show,
home, right?
right?
If my mom could have her own podcast, she's so amazing. Yeah, she's got a really cool childhood story as well. Extremely smart,
Yeah.
loves music trivia. Yeah, mom's cool. We should definitely
Yeah.
get mom
Hey,
on here.
that's awesome. I'm glad you had a cool mom. So you got in the insurance industry when
Yes,
you were like, how old? Yeah, 18, 20,
20 years
20 years
old.
old. Okay. And how
Yep,
long were you in that industry?
I still am.
Still am. Okay. So you had your own
Yes.
agency, right?
Yes. So that happens a little later. So have my kiddo go into a
Okay.
sales position at State Farm. Fast forward through that because that's a very also inundated story. But 2012, I get invited to open up my own American Family Agency. So
Okay.
I'm a captive agent, selling auto, home, some life insurance, and did that for a few years and end up finding the independent route where you can broker things through different
Yep.
companies. So,
Absolutely. I know
yep,
all about it.
opened up my own agency. And because it was my second time around, I was much more prepared because
Right.
my first agency, uh, I'm trying to figure out how to unpack this without going too far down the rabbit hole. Obviously, I was telling you I went to school and I changed my major to business. Once I figured out I
Okay.
wanted to be a salesperson, I changed my major to business and said this will probably be the most applicable, to what I'm going to be doing in sales. Well, let me tell you what, my business degree taught me nothing.
You know
I
how
mean,
often I hear that about a business
no,
degree? Like really, it's not,
no.
what's
You
the
just get
word?
slapped with a big ass bill in student loans and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's fun.
It's not
So
transferable to real world, I hear.
no, I learned more opening my first agency than school. And I wish if I could give advice to anybody opening up a business of any sort, my first rule to you is get a good CPA
Always. You
and
gotta
stay
have a good
and have
CPA.
them help you with bookkeeping, all whatever, or maybe hire a separate bookkeeper, whatever. But knowing how to do taxes, how to set aside taxes, because I opened up my agency and I made more money than I'd ever had in my life,
Right.
right? At a very young age. I think I was 23, 24 when I opened up my first agency. Well, guess what? When you're a 1099 contractor, nobody tells you, hey, you got to put X number of dollars aside for taxes. And I knew I did, but I didn't understand what that bill was going to look like the next year, right? So
Right.
I get slapped with a big old tax bill and going, oh man, what am I going to do?
And
So,
there.
yep. And luckily, when you're in sales, you can outsell all your problems, right?
Yeah. There's problems and solutions.
Yeah. So yeah, the next couple of years, I just was grinding it out to pay this damn tax bill, which fortunately was able to do. But going back to yep, second time around, opened up my agency. I knew exactly what it was going to take. I knew it was going to take everything. So
Yeah.
I downsized everything.
Yep.
Sold my car, bought a very inexpensive Honda Civic, lived in a tiny $800 a month apartment. I lived off credit cards. I think, oh, and financial advisors hate this, so plug your ears. I cashed out my 401k because I also knew that I was going to need that because I did have a W-2 job for a minute. So I had some money, saved up in that. So that helped me get through maybe 3 months. But yeah, that also taught me a lot of the grit that I did not know that I had. When you're building a business, especially an insurance business, you it took a long time to get out of the red, especially when it was just me,
Yeah.
you know. And I realized if I want to make this big, I'm going to need to scale. I'm going to need to
Yep.
hire people. I need to build a team. And ultimately, that's what made me successful. I was able to build a team, find a partner, a business partnership, and ultimately, we had a successful exit out of that. And here I am getting to do coaching and all the other fun stuff that I do.
Let's dive into to that transformation that you had from, being the car wash girl to the insurance agent to the independent insurance agent to scaling and building. So what I want people to hear is that, you know, the opportunities are there, number one. You just got to determine on what path you want the opportunity to be. And what I'm going to encourage people to do now, Kimmy kind of had this opportunity fall in her lap, but that was the gateway, right? Just to get her in the game to what she gets to do now, which is her purposes and her passages and something that truly means something to her heart, right? And that's the ticket. That's what we all want to get to. We all want to get to the life where we're doing something purposeful, meaningful, impactful to the outside world. And because we're doing that, we're being rewarded on all fronts, including financial, which, let's face it, money is an important part of this world. We need to have money to have the life that we want, have the experiences we want. We can't really do anything for free. It's going to cost you something,
Hmm.
and it's going to cost you at the very least time and effort, right? But it's
Absolutely.
also it's going to cost you money, and all that stuff too. But so for those out there that are kind of just like in that limbo, right, of wanting to go out and do your own thing versus be someone else's slave, then take a good opportunity and you can develop the skills. And it doesn't matter as long, like in the insurance industry, I know you got to pass background checks, things like that. But you can also create your own path, of a business or an idea, or an opportunity. But if
Hmm.
you get an opportunity and it makes logical sense, that's a great place to start because that's not necessarily where you're going to finish. Now you can start here, you can go the through the transitions through that. You can learn all the things and the skills, just like Kimmy kind of described, of how to, build and scale and do taxes and do all that stuff we don't like to talk about, but really is
But I
important.
think it should be a topic. Let's
A hundred
talk
percent it
about
should.
more. I
It
remember
it does need to.
coming from, again, a wealthy, background. I was always scared to talk about money with people. I thought,
Isn't that interesting too? That's so
yeah.
interesting.
And I remember it could just felt like super taboo. Wanted to talk about, well, how much do you make, or how much, you know, should we be saving, things like that. Like, no, we should be talking about that with our friends because it can educate them how to manage their money better. It's not something that they teach you in school.
Absolutely
That
not.
Yeah, I don't think they even teach you how to fill out a checkbook anymore, balance a
I
checkbook
I don't think they do anymore either. I remember
which is
doing that, but
crazy.
I was
But
also,
yeah.
in high school in the mid 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be
But
44 next month.
there you go. Yeah, they don't teach that stuff anymore. They don't teach how to run a profit and loss statement, which I think you should know even if you're not a business owner. You should
Or
be
your own
running a
budget.
personal P&L. And like I look
Yeah,
at it daily because I'm
right,
so obsessed about it now because I didn't do that in my first years in business, and shame
right.
on me. Totally, it probably would have turned out a lot different, right? So
You
I
probably would
wish
have
they would teach
avoided
that.
some of the hardships, right? Some of the struggles that you had you probably would have been able to avoid if you were, doing a profits and loss statements on your own budget and
Hmm.
projections,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you know. Um, so yeah, you're right. That's something like, I mean, that's one of the crusades I'm on is financial education, financial implementation, discipline, things like that. And that comes from not because I was a poor kid growing up, even though I was. That comes from my foster father, who is now 73 and doesn't have two nickels to rub together.
Mm.
He has all the best. He's very rich in spirit and soul and character and who he is as a man. He brings so much great richness to this world, but he's poor financially. And I'm just like, how is it that a man has worked as hard as he has his whole life, like
Yeah.
still to this day, works as hard as he does and cannot choose every aspect of his life. He has to do what he has to do to make money. And he can't just go do what he wants when he wants. Like he literally doesn't have much that you can measure, but he gave me everything that you can't measure, right? He gave me
Yeah.
character. So I always say he gave me three pillars: my work ethic, my integrity, and my character. And those were because that's who he was, you know.
Absolutely. That's one of the things you said the word choice. That's the beautiful thing that money and opportunities allow you to have are more choices, right? That's why I am grateful to live in America, where we live because we have that opportunity
Mhm.
to be able to create things for our own, to be able to scale, to be able to feel unlimited, right? And
Yeah.
I pray and I hope that it stays that way,
Yeah.
because that's what makes us great.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned choice because similar, my both my parents very hardworking. Mom just retired last year. Live a much different lifestyle. And I believe because they didn't have a good financial advisor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it looks a lot different. They lost a lot of, we could say it's from the economy, we could say whatever, but it's just purely bad planning, right?
Yeah.
And a bad business deal. I think, dad had a contract that didn't do what they were supposed to do. I don't know the details. I also wish I knew a lot of those details because it would have taught me, a lot about finances and such. But same, like you, I watched them and I'm like, it would have been a lot different, should someone have taught them how to plan better.
What's the question you're gonna go ask your dad after we get out of this podcast today?
Oh gosh, I have so many questions for him. He's been working on writing some books. I would
Awesome.
love to help him complete those. Um, dad's getting older,
Hmm.
and I would love to get that out of his brain, before he leaves this earth, because he's got some stories too. And
I
he's
believe it.
not dad is not the vulnerable type. My dad was also football jock. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though, yeah, I painted him as this, hermit engineer, which he is, he very into football. He was very into sports as a kid. He was an Air Force brat,
Okay.
uh, from Massachusetts. Oh goodness, what else? But his stories are especially around building his businesses and just some of the very interesting people that he's met along the way. I would love to hear more about that. And quite honestly, I would love to hear more about his childhood. So to this day, I'll be 36 this year. I don't know much about my dad's upbringing. Um, Mostly because he didn't talk about it much. I think now that I know how to ask better questions, I think I can get some of that out of him. Uh, just yeah, would love to know what that was like because I can assume that he also felt much like an outlier. Supposedly he didn't start talking until he was 4. So I can
Okay.
imagine that maybe they thought that he wasn't smart. Uh, if only they could see him now.
Right.
One of the smartest people I know.
You
And
know what's what's funny is the ones that they label or kind of are slow developers in some ways
Mhm.
usually turn out to be the most intelligent or most impactful, even if they're not intelligent people, like on the scale of IQ and stuff. Like the ones that get the D's and F's in school are the ones that become billionaire entrepreneurs, right? Not the kid
Well,
that got straight A's and honor society necessarily. Some of those are too,
sure.
but
Oh, yeah, they
a
go
lot
on
of
to
the
invent some crazy things. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
I think it goes back to the beginning of this podcast. We were talking about just how so many people end up labeling themselves as one thing. I believe that everybody is multidimensional. They just need to believe
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely they are. And that's one thing we struggle with, like a lot of times with their identity, so I know a lot of people in this, that are going to listen to this show. They have some sort of identity that either they adopted or that was given to them. Like for me, it was at risk and troubled youth. You felt like an outcast. I've been to prison. Oh, I've been a drug addict. Oh, I've been, you know, poor. I've been all these different things, and that becomes really an identity of who we are in our story.
Mhm.
And I think that's good and bad. You can wear that as a badge. Like, yeah, I was at risk and troubled youth. Boom, there's my badge. Perfect. Now you know who I was. Now you see who I am, you know, and you get to decide whether or not you're wearing the big logo that fits the picture or you're wearing a badge that's part of your story.
Oh,
You,
I
you
love
know,
that. I love
so,
that.
you know,
I just pictured like my old Girl Scout vest when you
I was picturing my Boy Scout
all my
thing.
badges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
I
this is who I
love that
am.
analogy. Whole, wearing your badges instead of a big logo because when you wear a logo, perfect example. Perfect example. Let's pretend I was wearing a red hat that says "Make America Great Again."
Yeah.
Right? Let's pretend I'm wearing that.
I'm
People are
seeing it right now.
automatically going to assume one thing about me, right? Instead of
What is that?
all the badges that come along with it. Here's a great example too. I remember I was always scared to post about guns.
Yeah.
Here's a hot topic, right? I love polarizing stuff because I have because there's so many different things, right? We have our badges. You
Hmm.
can grab one of my badges and assume something about me and I'm like, "Wait, that's not even remotely correct," right?
Right.
Um
They make a judgment.
yeah, 1,000%. I am definitely pro 2A. I was a competitor in the shooting,
That's right.
all kinds of guns,
Yep.
pistols, rifles,
Competitive shooter.
shotguns, right?
Yep.
And I love talking to people because they think, oh my goodness, you must be a gun nut. Well, maybe I am, right? But that doesn't mean I fall under some of the other stereotypes that people assume about that. Well,
The
Kimmy,
the
then you
picture
must
the
be a
media paints.
yes, then Kimmy, you must be against this, this, and this. And I'm like, no,
No,
wrong. you know?
I'm pro independence. Be what you want.
Yes, yeah. I would say uh, I I am for people's individual individualistic everything as well as capitalism because we live in America that gives you the opportunity to be abundant.
Right.
I think people forget that you do not get that right in other places.
That's 100% true. And can I touch on that for a minute? I got two things to
Yeah.
say about this.
Yes.
Number one, so I had my belief challenged on the capitalism part.
Well, everyone has a
It,
different definition of it, is the
well,
thing.
what they said, I'm just going to say what they said. And it really kind of like, oh, yeah, that's really good. Was they say capitalism is not what makes America great. It's free enterprise, the ability to have free enterprise that makes America great.
Mhm.
Capitalism is very corruptible. Free enterprise is just a concept of creating something.
Sure.
So the freedom and the ability to create things here is really what makes America great, and you can become very prosperous financially and for your community and for economy in the process. And actually, our country really is set up. The whole tax code system is set up for free enterprise, entrepreneurialism, things like that. But I want to touch on something else with that is And so I thought, I was like, wow, that's actually pretty profound. Is capitalism isn't really the basis of this country; it's free enterprise. But I ask immigrants any chance I get to talk to a true immigrant into our country that was not born, in America. I ask them, what do you think about America compared to your home country? And
Mm.
unanimously, they always say America is the greatest place on earth. So we view it. So I always say, as Americans, we have what I called spoiled rotten child syndrome.
Oh yeah.
We like, a lot of us haven't really seen real places in this world, right? So I say it like this. So the most gutter places you can ever find in America are like Beverly Hills is some of the best places you can ever find in some other parts of the world. We're not in America, we're blessed to not be murdered because we're born the wrong gender or believe the wrong God. We have running water, we have resources for it, we have programs. We're not sleeping in a mud puddle, um, all kinds of things. So, but unanimously, they all say, I'm so grateful to be here. And I've met people that were very, like, very powerful people in their countries, high up in political rankings and things like that. One story, there's a roadside bomb that went off,
Mm.
and he was a diplomat, very successful, bodyguards, all that stuff. A roadside bomb went off near him, and he realized the implications of what could happen to his kids and his family. So he moved his kids and his family to America, gave up that whole life, and now drives a taxi here in the United States and is so happy because he says, my family has safety.
Yeah.
Another individual I talked to, very successful man now. He owns a big screen printing, embroidery shop. He's from Belarus. He's from a communist country.
Mm.
He
Yeah.
says, all they told me, they never told me like achieving the American dream was easy. They just told me it was possible and I can. So he worked a job, went to school at night, started his business, doing all three. He has like 15 kids, and now he like is very successful man here in America, and he loves it here just because he had the ability and the opportunity. Not that it was easy or that it was given to him, but this is the only place you have it the way we do.
Absolutely. And this could be a whole podcast on itself just about patriotism and going back to the word capitalism. I think a lot of people associate monopolies,
Right.
with that. So
Yeah.
again, I think some people have a different
Corporate.
definition of it.
Yeah.
I look at it as exactly like you said, opportunity, the freedom to build,
Yeah.
because you don't get that elsewhere. And I think you brought up a really cool point about the immigrant mentality is a lot of them have a lot more patriotism than
Mhm.
people that were born here, which just boggled my mind. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, what?" And, like, maybe it's because both my parents come from, immigrant families that they, raised my sister and I to think that way, so thank goodness. But I think that is another thing that they just don't kids aren't reminded to be able to think freely.
Right.
Again, this could become a whole
It
nother
sure
topic.
can. But
Yeah,
I'm gonna end it with
but
this one last perspective on that topic, right? So I always say, like, we're in the gated community in America. We've
mm,
never been outside of our nice little padded gated community unless we just go to see some other parts of the world. I have seen some other parts of the world, so I know how it really is
mhm.
in other places. Outside of your resort in Mexico or wherever you go is the slums, literally outside the gate, just not too far.
Well, there's
So
no middle class in a lot of the other countries.
I would argue that
It's
there
either
might not
you're
be
very
here.
wealthy or you're not.
Yeah, we're getting that way here. But
Oh
let's
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
we can we
Indeed.
can we can shelf that for a little bit. And like you
Yes.
said, that could be a whole nother show. But so we're gonna move past, like, you were successful as the insurance agent. So you were not only very shy to talk to people when we started this podcast, and you ran off stage crying. And now, like, you develop your people skills, and you end up getting into the insurance industry where now you have to talk to people all day, every day, and be persuasive. And I want to touch on this because a lot of people struggle with the understanding of the difference between persuasion and manipulation.
Mm,
Let me
yeah.
ask you that question. What do you
Yes.
think the difference is?
So recently, I have become certified in neuro-linguistic programming. And a lot of people think that NLP can be used to manipulate because it is a way of persuasive language. It is a way to reframe things for people when
Okay.
used improperly, right? And I think that is the same in sales. When
Yeah.
used properly, can be persuasive to help others.
Right.
Do it the wrong way, totally. You might be selling something that someone does not need, in
Right.
if you're doing it the wrong way. So I think just depends on how you use it is what it ultimately becomes.
100%. And you're accurate. So the way I like summarize everything, you're right on the head, by the way. Hit that nail on the head. But
Woo.
persuasion is convincing a person or a group of people to do something that is the best interest of all parties involved, me and you.
Mhm.
Manipulation is convincing a person or a group of people to do something that is purely and solely in your benefit at the detriment of them most of the time. So people need to get over this stigma of persuasion and manipulation. You can be very persuasive. The world changers were very persuasive.
Mhm.
They were using whatever their topic was. I'll use Martin Luther King or Gandhi. Gandhi, I have a quote right here: "Be the change you wish to see in the world." It's my favorite quote ever. And then you got Nelson Mandela, who became the president of his country after 25 years in prison. That's a whole nother topic. That's a whole
Oh yeah.
nother resilient underdog story of itself. I should just get on a show and just tell that story because that was something that empowered people, was something good, for all parties involved, really at the best benefit of the other people, not you, right? And then manipulation is you're taking advantage of people, you're hurting people, you're looking out for yourself before you're looking out for them, and and that is bad. So people have confused those two. Do you agree with that, that people have confused the two, uh the difference between persuasion and manipulation?
Yeah. I think some of it might come from people that just don't know what they don't know. I think if you're not somebody that believes that you are capable of that, you might talk down about something too, or just have a different perspective because you just haven't maybe experienced the good
Right.
part of it, right?
Yeah. Yep. And oftentimes you're right, that does shape our initial beliefs around something,
Hmm.
is our first experiences. Like a friend told me the other day, there is no second chances at first impressions. I'm like, well, you're right, but um I think there is with me, because believe me, I've showed up not always at my finest in some first interactions, whatever, however it was, whatever context, drunk, whatever, at a bar or something. I don't really drink anymore very much, but either way. um all right, so I want to move into now exactly what you talked about, where you are the master, by the way, you left that part out. Neuro linguistic programming. Help us understand what that is. And remember, everybody listening, this is a girl that went screaming and crying off stage when she was in kindergarten. That's not important. She was afraid of failure. That's the important part. Afraid to be judged. That's the important part. She progresses in lives, go through some hard times, ends up being a powerhouse in the insurance industry, and is still. And now she is taking on a whole nother animal, and not because she has like college degrees to support this path, but she wanted to evolve. So she becomes a master neuro linguistic programming expert. Help us just understand what that is to begin with.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what. Before I learned what NLP was, uh, so we'll go back to when I was shooting. There's a book called With Winning in Mind, and I bring it up on almost every podcast I'm on because it is
Writing it down.
so good. It changed my mind, changed my brain, right? The way I think. It's that whole book is basically all about how to create positive affirmations in your mind to rewire the way you do a habit or see yourself doing something. So say Atomic Habits is a great one too. I just finished that.
That one.
So NLP. I uh was with a group of realtors. My boyfriend and I went to a seminar that was sold to me as a place where, hey, if you want to be a better communicator, you should come to this class. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to be a better communicator, right?
100%.
And what's really cool is from that you learn the best communicators are also the best listeners, right? You gotta it's
Take
it's
note of
it's both
that
ways.
nugget.
Yep, big nugget. I walked away from that, asking good questions and listening. So NLP is essentially modeling what successful people do
Sure.
in how you talk to yourself and how you
Mhm.
talk to others, which was amazing. As soon as I learned what that was, it validated everything that I had learned in that book and learned in sports. How you see yourself doing something is how you're going to do it, right? So if
Right.
you believe, oh, I can't do this, I'm gonna fail at this, or you word things in the negative, it's detrimental. For example, and they use this in the book of when you're growing up as a kid, what are your parents always telling you when you're growing up? It's always no. Don't do this. Don't do that. Oh, don't spill the milk. Well, guess what you do? You spill the damn milk. And both both NLP and that book with winning in mind talk a lot about your unconscious or your subconscious mind. And the best way to look at it is think about when you're learning to drive. Do you know how to drive manual transmission, stick shift?
Yeah, that's what I learned on in the field.
There we go. Okay. Then this is a great story for you. And I'm finding that a lot of people these days do not know how to drive stick shift. So
Not
it's
nowadays.
hard to use this story with people. But remember when you were learning to drive stick, right? You're pushing in the clutch. Okay. Now I got to shift the gear. Oh my gosh. Okay. Now, what it was a very conscious learning
There's a lot of
happening, right?
steps,
Yeah.
RPMs,
You are in it,
clutch,
right? You're thinking about, okay, I got to
exchange.
do this and that. You're probably talking to whoever's teaching you, whether it was your dad, the driving teacher, whatever. There's a lot
My dad
happening.
yelling at me.
Yeah. See, it's all happening in your I'm pointing here. I don't actually know what part of your brain it is, but it's all very conscious. You are
Yeah.
thinking about it in the moment.
Yeah, it's
And
intentional.
yep, 6 months, maybe only 6 days, depends on how long it took you. You're at your destination and you can't even remember how you got there
Been
because it
there.
became so subconscious
Yep.
that,
Autopilot.
yep, exactly. So now it became a subconscious habit. Now, there's another piece of your brain that they actually talk about in the book about your self-image. So in NLP, it's more your identity, your avatar, how you see yourself doing something, right? So, do you like to drive fast?
Yep.
Okay. Then your self-image is somebody that likes to drive fast. Okay, race car, Ricky Racer, right? And I'm the same. I have a lead
I've had
foot.
a lot of tickets. I put cruise control all the
There
time.
you go. Yes. The worst ticket I
I
ever
can't be
got
trusted.
wasn't even in my own car. You ready for this? It was in my mother's minivan. I that thing drove, it was a brand new van. It
That's
drove so
hilarious.
smooth. I'm
See,
just cruising down the freeway in California, coming home to Arizona, and I got, yes, a
you can't
ticket in,
trust
oh God.
teenagers in a minivan. I'll tell you that right now.
No, this happened like a couple years ago.
Oh, you can't trust grown-ups in
No, this
minivans either,
I'm a
apparently.
full-grown adult speeding in mom's minivan.
That's
Uh,
hilarious.
yeah, good times. But so anyway, back to the self-image piece. That's because I still view myself as someone that drives fast. If I want to change that, there's a reason I don't, but we can always touch on that later. If I wanted to change my self-image or my identity about something, you can use NLP, you can use the positive affirmations from Lanny Basham's book with winning in mind. You have to dig into your unconscious brain to do that, right? And to do that, it becomes conscious for a minute. With you can do it through positive affirmations, you can do it through your language patterns, how you talk to yourself about it. You can there's different tools that you learn in NLP about changing your habits, which is basically you're attaching it to the emotion that you feel before you do something.
Pay
It's
attention,
super
listeners.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super cool, and it's interesting. I really enjoy. being on this podcast because you ask a lot how I feel when I do something. And that was something that I was not taught as a kid,
Right.
to talk about how do you feel? How does that make you feel? How do you don't talk about your feelings, so it becomes a very surface level conversation. So I've had,
Very
over
challenging, by the way. When people ask me how I feel, I'm like, like,
yeah,
I don't know if I
it's
really want to get into that.
but you
So
open up so much quicker
you
when you
do,
start talking about it that way.
and
And
you
I've
have a
had
lot of progression
oh
in you,
yes.
and in the conversation. You know,
Yes. And it's so cool because one of the best mentors that I had in the insurance industry, the best way to sell life insurance. So any life insurance people listening to this, listen to this bit. The way he starts off a life conversation, he asks the client, "How do you feel about life insurance?" And
I hate it.
almost
Right.
almost always they say, "Well, I think it does this for us. I think it." And he's like, "No, not what you think it does." He's like, "How do you feel about it?"
That's a great question.
And it opens up a whole can of worms. Maybe they've had an experience with it. Maybe they had a, who knows, right? But it's a great way to lead that conversation because it is an emotional sale, right? Sales
Right.
are emotional.
Emotional
So why
logic.
aren't we talking about emotions in our sales conversations?
That's a fair point. Got a
Yeah.
point there.
Yeah.
Listen to that.
That's when the light bulb went off, and
Yep.
that's when I actually became a sales. That's when I was able to put the title sales right in my in my name.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's NLP in a nutshell, is learning how to talk to yourself, how to talk to others, and being able to
Yeah.
rewire your unconscious mind to be able to do things better.
It's
Model
so
successful people.
to summarize that just for us, like a package to put it in right now, just so, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the inter inner communication and outward persuasion of conversation
Yep, and then modeling what the successful people do. Why reinvent the
habits.
wheel if something's working the way,
Habits,
in a
right?
great
Like,
way, right?
kind of like Think and Grow Rich, right?
Yes.
You know, it has, 6 steps and 13 principles.
Mhm.
If you've ever read that book, I don't know if you have.
Parts of it.
Yeah.
Like I admitted earlier in the podcast, I was not a reader. Only
Right.
recently have I actually finished nonfiction books.
Right.
And
Okay.
it to this day it's hard. It's hard to do. And as I'm saying this, here I am telling myself that it's hard. It's not. It's not, everybody. I
It's just
finished two.
intentional. It's
Yeah.
intentional.
It is, and it was because I had a purpose for reading these books. I was like, I even if I learned one single thing out of this, it was worth sitting through that, right? And
Right.
who knows? Maybe see, I need to do a little bit of a baggage clearing around this. Is for some reason I have something against reading, so
Well, let me
we'll
add to
circle
that.
back to that.
I'm gonna see if I can't help you with this right now. Number one, I grew up hating reading. I still hate reading. I read a lot and I read a lot of books. And what I found that I enjoy, number one, I get to choose what I read now, right? I get to
Yeah.
choose versus you need to read this book and give this book report so I can get a good grade that makes my teacher happy, gets me academic accolades at the school. Um, and I don't get in trouble at home. Really,
There you
that's
go.
really what it was. I don't get in trouble at home if I get these grades good enough. My parents aren't going to harass me about my grades.
Mhm.
I'm going to do it just to shut my parents up, to make my teachers think I'm a good kid, but I hate every second of it. So now I get to choose what I read. I don't read fiction books. I think it's a waste of time for me. Like, it's not going to do. I watch a movie if I want a storyline and to be entertained. That's just me, though. You
Yeah,
know.
it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
I love asking people, who do read a lot, the why behind it, and I
Well,
think
I'll tell you
the
my
the
why.
the fiction stories really can help with creativity.
Sure.
You can paint the
Absolutely.
picture in your brain. For me, I think I hold on to the belief that experience is the best teacher. So I'd rather just go and do it,
Yeah.
fail,
Yeah.
which doesn't always feel good, right?
Never.
Than read
Never feels good.
Yeah, then read the lessons. I was
Right.
like, "No, let me go do it and figure it out on my own." So that's just my stubbornness talking, everybody.
Right.
That's
So
that's purely that.
the reason why, like I said, I still don't like reading, but I like the mechanics of it.
Mhm.
I like actually having to intentionally take a step. Number one, I gotta find a book that sounds interesting enough to read. I pick it
Mhm.
up, I read the bio, whatever, front, back, forward, whatever, right? Like, okay, this book is interesting me enough to spend money on it, number one, or check it out at a library, whatever your process is. Um, then I have to intentionally pick it up, open the covers, read, process, turn the page, do this over and over and over again until I get through the book, get whatever I got out of it. Then I put it back on the shelf. Here's what I really like, the back end of reading. What it really does is every time you pick it up, you get something different. The words are the same, the cover's
Mm.
the same amount of pages in the book. But I read it and I get, I don't know, whatever I got out of it. I need to be more courageous, right? I need to just go for it. Well, I pick it up a year later. I was courageous and I've gone for it. Now I pick it up and I read the same book, the same words, the same pages. Everything is identical to this book, but what I get out of it is a completely different message. The thing about a book is it's a never ending story.
I love that. That is so cool. It depends on, yeah, what state, what perspective you're in is what you're gonna get out of that book, which I think, gosh, I would love to just interview you about that on what you think. So when you look for a book, what I know you said you looked at the cover, but what first attracts you about the book?
On fiction. So I love business books, personal development books,
Mhm.
and I'll have a lot of love for the Bible.
There you go. Now, when you're looking at choosing a book, are you looking at the aesthetics of the cover? Are you looking for the author's bio? Like maybe where did they come from? Can you resonate with it? What's the most important thing to you when you're looking at this book? What stands out to you?
Well, let's describe picking a book like dating. A lot of things in life are very similar to the dating process. Like, oh, I see this person. Oh, wow, they're beautiful. Look at the cover on that book. Wow, that's attractive. Right colors. I like the way they wrote the title. I'm gonna pick this book up. I'm gonna like get to know this book a little bit. I'm gonna grab this book off the shelf. I'm gonna like flip it over. I'm gonna read the backstory. I'm gonna ask you questions about you. Right. I'm gonna
Yeah.
read the back of this book. I'm gonna get a little information. Like, wow, okay. All right. I might want to have a little more conversation with this person. Hey, can I get your number? Oh, hey, let me flip open the author's bio or the forward. What do other people have to say about this person? Hey, do you know that girl over there? Tell me about her, you know? Or do you know that guy over there? What's he like? Well, let's read about that. Let's read what other people have to say about this book or this.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take this book on a date,
I
and then
love
I
that.
go get this book and I might like I hang out and I read this book and get to know this book and the contents of it, and I can decide, okay, is this a book that's going to go on my bookshelf, or is this a book I'm going to maybe like, hey, friend, you might like this book. It might be a better suited book for you, or I'm gonna or give it back to the library, or just give it to Goodwill, or do whatever you do with your books. Maybe I'm going to burn it. I don't know, but
There's been
I'm
so
just
many great analogies this morning that you've made. I can't wait to listen back to this and write those down.
oh yeah, you'll get a full episode.
Awesome.
So that's, I mean, that's really kind of how I got the process of a book. And just like in a relationship, you got to be intentional,
Hmm.
with your book. Be intentional in your relationships with people, be intentional in your relationships with books and knowledge and things like that. And actions, respect it and be open to what it can share with you,
Yeah.
So, and then you will always get something positive no matter
Love
what.
that. Love that. Next book, I'm gonna go in with a different perspective around that piece. See, that's
Yeah.
that's the beautiful thing about conversations and meeting people and just being open. You get to learn new things and it
Yeah.
can change your life.
It
One
absolutely can.
single moment, can
Yeah.
can change your life.
I've had those aha moments, you know, like part of the reason I am the way I am with people now is because when I was about 15, I was with my dad. We were riding in, there was an old Ford, like 1970 something Ford Ranger, blue. We called him Old Blue. He was the ranch truck. The bench seat smelled like gas.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's the best. We were riding back from the rodeo, and my dad says he always started it with son, and I either gonna get my ass chewed or he's gonna give me some wisdom. I never knew. He didn't
Yeah.
pre-frame this. You should probably
Right.
learn about some neuro-linguistic programming. But anyway, he would just say son. I'm like, I'm paying attention.
Oh, yep.
Yep. And he said, never be afraid to help your fellow man. If they need
Mm,
this shirt off your back more than you need it, you give it to them. And that just kind of planted a seed. Like years later, after I went through my getting out of the house, being a rebellious young adult, making all the mistakes, ruining my credit, all that stuff, like just being a wild ass kid, right?
sure.
Like that, it came back up. Like I love, like I have a nonprofit. I would go out in the streets and feed homeless people. I bring Christmas to women and children in shelters. I
Mm,
would do all this stuff, and it all was off that seed. Never
wow.
be afraid to help your fellow man. If they need
I
the
love
shirt
that.
off your back more than you need it, give it to them. And at the time, I'm like, okay, dad, whatever. But that just sat there. And that's like a true reflection of my heart now, you know. And I'm like, yeah, I am the kid. I am that guy. I love to help people. I will give you like I've given my last dollar away more than once, you know. Now I have to control myself. I got a daughter, you know.
I so resonate with that. Yeah,
So
that's I wish that was another thing that they would teach
yeah.
to kids. Imagine what the world would be like when they teach, yeah, helping others, being kind, being
So
open to new perspectives, just
mhm.
yeah.
I teach my daughter that today. So my daughter just had her 6th birthday here last week.
Oh wow. What a
And
great age.
so whenever we get, you know, like Christmas, birthdays, and we get new stuff, we literally go through everything she has and we have a conversation of what she wants to share with less fortunate kids. So should we pick out and have conversations together of what we're going to share with someone else and she can have our new
Wow.
stuff.
I love that.
So so I'm teaching her that now, you know, like be kind, be generous, be sharing, be giving, be humble. I do
Mhm.
affirmations with her. I ask her if this is my favorite one. Are you a queen or are you a princess?
Ooh. Um, you're gonna see me look away from the screen for a minute just because I'm gonna write that one down.
Okay. And so the reason why I ask her this question,
I like that one.
number one, I can't stand princesses, but here's why. Princesses in the Disney movies, they're not bad. They're cutesy, whatever. But I'm like, do you want to be your own person? Do you want to be humble? Do you want to be kind? You know, like I think a lot of times princesses have a spoiled, rotten attitude. Like they're spoiled kids, you know, they're spoiled people. They have a sense of entitlement, right? And they're like, I deserve this because I exist, you know. Queens, on the other hand, they're very strong, very independent, very self-sufficient. They're the king's greatest ally, his greatest confidant. She does not need him. She can handle stuff when he's out at war. The queen runs the kingdom when he's gone. There's
Yeah.
loyalty, there's love, there's trust. There's so many qualities in a queen that I think define a strong woman. And a strong woman needs to be praised. And the greatest gift I think that anybody can give you is choosing to be with you when they don't need you. A queen doesn't need a king, but a king needs a queen.
That's that's the golden nugget, everybody. If you got anything from this podcast, that was it. I think any girl, even full-grown women could benefit from being reminded that.
100%. So I drill that one in my daughter because I don't want her to ever to become dependent on anybody. I want her to choose who's around, when they're around, and why they're around with purpose.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm going to tell you straight up as a man, we can get by ourselves, but we never reach our potential without the right queen.
There you go, people.
So,
Those are the words of wisdom.
all right, let's talk about. You still got time?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Kimiko. I called you Kimiko, the axe slayer. Sorry. Anyway, the axe slayer, the guitar, right? Like you're like the lead singer of this heavy metal rock band. So, like, let's recap Kimiko one more time.
Let's do it.
Running off stage, crying, afraid to talk to people, afraid of rejection. Goes through life kind of trying to figure out who she is, where she belongs, things like that, like we all do. Most of us do as kids and teenagers and going into adulthood. She finds her real voice as she gets into, she has a child, young, unexpected. She has to now, you know, grow
Yes.
so she can give this child what the child deserves. She becomes a powerhouse in the insurance industry. She becomes a master neurolinguistic programming expert. She coaches. She's on stage all the time. And that leads us right into she's on stage all the time now. From crying and running off stage, now she's just waiting to grab a microphone and scream. So let's talk about how you ended up becoming the lead singer of Iron Priestess.
Oh, wow. This in itself could also be a podcast.
Yeah,
So
we can save it if you want.
I think I can paraphrase some of it. We can always, dive in more if we need to. So music has always been a huge part of my life.
Okay.
Uh, Also goes back to my parents being the amazing people that they are. My parents raised my sister and I to have an appreciation for music, regardless of the genre. Obviously, we choose our favorites, right? But we would have music appreciation nights at home where each of us would bring
Cool.
our, bring
That's
a
cool.
CD, you know, is when CDs were still a thing, right?
Yeah.
And we'd have to sample the entire CD of
Okay.
that band, of that artist, whatever we choose. So it could be anything from blues to heavy metal.
I love
I think my
blues.
sister brought DMX a couple times. My dad, he had to sit through it whether he liked it or not, but it was amazing to be able to hear we learned so many different genres, right, from that. And from that, excuse me, simultaneously, my mom encouraged us to get into extracurricular things like musicals, choir, dance classes, stuff like that. So just music was a huge piece of my life growing up. Now, my story is very interesting because I go from being, super shy and not having a voice to all of a sudden finding a voice, right? I'm playing lead parts in musicals. I am singing
Okay.
all the time. Uh, I I played piano as a young child. I played guitar in my teenage years. So again, music, huge piece of my life, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Fast forward to my young adult years, I lose what I call my voice. I mean, not physically, but uh, you know, getting into whether it was a toxic relationship or just an environment that was not, conducive to who I was.
Right.
Essentially, I lost my voice for years. And about 3.5 years ago or so, find my voice again. And how I did that involves singing. I would sing songs with one of the guys that worked for me with Jesse in my office. He would bring his acoustic guitar to the office and I'd begin singing. And being around people that supported that confidence was huge.
Huge.
Not just in the music part, but just in my business, being
Right.
around people that supported, wow, you are this, and this, just validated that. And
Yeah.
I began to get that confidence back is
Right.
how is what I think.
Confidence in your diversity.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and it helped in music, it helped in speaking, whether it was an advertisement for the insurance agency, a spokesmodel for, somebody else that ended up hiring me for, a couple of things on the news. It just honestly, it just kind of like happened overnight, I feel like. So the music
Mhm.
piece is I started posting the videos of me and Jesse singing at the office. And the guitarist of a tribute band called the Jack, it's a tribute to AC/DC, found me on Facebook and said, "Hey, we're doing an event. We need some female singers. Come on down." Like, okay, what am I singing? Well, he gave me a couple AC/DC songs. Mind you, I'd never sang rock. I didn't think that my voice could do rock music. I love metal, like the screamy metal,
Yeah.
all that stuff, right? But I typically sang more of the pop, um, like Lady Gaga, no doubt, that kind of stuff I felt like
Yeah.
fit my voice better. Anywho, uh, they invite me to this event. I get up and sing, and I still have the videos of it. I actually posted it recently on my Instagram of just how mousy, like nervous I was to do this because I'm like, this is not my genre. I don't even really know these songs. Well, I know AC/DC, but I'd never performed them live, right? So I didn't have that confidence. And apparently, it was so different from some of the other rock singers that I guess I got noticed, and I ended up getting invited to sing in a band, guest singing, ultimately turning into creating my own band with the music that I love and just leaning into it. You know, it's a fun story to tell because it's kind of easy to tell because it literally just happened. It just felt right. I
That's
enjoyed
what
it.
happens when it is right.
Yeah, it just felt right, and it's gaining momentum. So that's super exciting too.
Yeah.
And I
So
just
I didn't realize Iron Priestess was your own band that you created. I thought you just went and, became a singer of a band that was
no,
looking.
this one we created it. The whole band created it. It
That's
started
super
with
cool.
me, Gonzalo, and Sean. So that's the guitarist, our bassist, and it's evolved into what it is now. Uh Nolly being our other guitarist, Andy is our drummer. So it definitely is absolutely a team effort, when it came to recruiting people, but we're a tribute band to Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. So no originals. Maybe one day I would love to have some originals, but this is a tribute band to
Yeah.
the metal gods,
They were the originals.
Yeah. Oh, for
Um,
sure.
so I want to just touch on this and then I want to ask you a question. Um, and I want to save this for a whole nother episode. So you have a podcast
I do.
called Metal Health Podcast, which super cool name. And especially knowing you to be a metal chick, right?
Yeah.
Um, give a synopsis. Give me your elevator pitch on what that's about.
Yeah. So I actually co-host that with another gentleman. His name is Joe Hollier, who's also in the insurance industry. And fun fact, that's how we know each other, yet we've never met in person.
Wait, hold on. You have
Yeah.
a whole podcast with a man from the same industry that you've never met in person, but you have a podcast
Correct.
together.
Yep.
How did that happen?
We love to tell the story because it's literally he invited me. He had an insurance podcast.
Yeah,
He invited me to that, and we got so deep into talking about metal music because we both love metal and how it can affect somebody's uh well-being. And we were like, oh my gosh, this could be a whole podcast in itself. So that's how we started it. And we bring people on to talk about music, and it's kind of evolved into more than just metal. So we talk about music and how that's, makes them feel, how it's affected their life. Maybe it's gotten through a hard time. Um, and a very diverse set of guests. So people that are in music, some people that aren't at all. It's really fun. And what's cool is we put it on, Spotify Anchor, so you can put music along with it. So we break up the actual speaking with music that either we've talked about in the podcast or, maybe is relevant to the
really cool.
subject. So it's super fun. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Now, here's my question. If you could tell all the audience, man, woman, child, whoever might tune in, if you could give them one piece of advice that would really, give them the courage to go out and chase that dream, that vision, that idea, but where they come from, their belief systems, what they've done wrong in this life is telling them that they're not worthy or they're not capable or they don't have a voice that's valuable or whatever that is, the lie that they might be telling themselves. What would you say to them to help them break through that barrier?
Find a coach or a mentor.
Elaborate.
Go find somebody that's doing what you want to do, or if it's something that's never been done yet, find somebody that's doing something similar that you can relate the process to what you want to do. What that will do is you'll gain perspective from someone that's done something, excuse me, find someone that's done that successfully. You can model them in the way they do everyday life, in the way they do business. You can it, sometimes it honestly just helps to have some skin in the game. You're you're tasked with doing something, or maybe you're paying them. It's going to make you work harder, and it gives you another perspective that you might not have had on your own. But the important piece of finding someone that's done it successfully is literally following their process. That's literally what NLP is, as well as modeling successful people, right? Is there was obviously a pattern to how they got there, and you can apply that same pattern to whatever you're choosing to do. Again, if it's something that you want to do that hasn't been done yet, you can find an industry or find something that is similar that can be applied. But, like insurance, right? Insurance, if you want to learn how to get insurance, go work for somebody. Actually, here's a great example of this. If you follow Alex Hermosi,
Oh
he
yeah.
talks about go shadow someone, work for them for free if you need to, just to
Yeah.
learn how to do it, right?
Yep.
And then go out and provide so much value that people have to buy from you. That's essentially his message, right?
Yep.
But he also talks about just go shadow somebody to go learn. It'll speed up the
100%.
process. And this is coming from a girl that literally has lived her whole life. Go figure it out on your own through experience. I would have learned so much
Painful.
faster if I would have, been in it and
Yeah.
being mentored.
Oh man, I can resonate with that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to conclude today's episode, because I have a feeling we're definitely going to have a part two, right? But
Yeah.
where can people contact you? How can they find you on social medias? How can they get in touch with you if they want to get some of your coaching or go see your band or whatever it is that you want to
Absolutely. Well,
people to come
fortunately,
to?
I'm
You
pretty
know,
easy to find. I think I'm the only Kimiko Donahue out there so far, which is
I know.
really
Hey, I
interesting.
feel that one too.
Yeah. So easy to find. I'm on Facebook under my name, LinkedIn, uh, Instagram. I have Linktree as well. You can just look me up by Kimiko Donahue. So easy to find. Please connect, follow me. I post a lot about everything that I do. I know a lot of people, marketers, teach, the theme and stick with it. I post me. It's going to be, music. It's going to be my business. It might be some flashback stories of some of the things that I have done and what it's done for me in my life. So, if you're coming in there expecting, uh, one one dimension, you're not gonna get it.
Good. One dimension is boring.
Yes,
Be authentic.
absolutely.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Resilient Underdog. And thank you, Kimiko, for dropping all your knowledge. And as always, stay resilient and go pursue your dreams. Have a good one. Bye.